Oh, okay, okay. So the question is using a pumpkin to ferment inside. Well, I mean, I've done some fermenting inside pumpkins, watermelons, and once a giant eggplant. And I mean, I'd say the eggplant is the one I would recommend least. Um, but sure. I mean, I think that like these are by definition shorter term ferments because over time, these things break down and they will stop holding the liquid, and you really need to hold the liquid in there. So I mean that's the challenge. But oh my God, I mean I made beautiful kimchi inside of a watermelon, and fermented it for most of a week, and then served it right in the watermelon, and it worked out so well. At first I thought you were going to ask about fermenting pumpkins and winter squash. And a few years ago in a restaurant, I ordered a pickle plate, and the pickle plate, along with like pickled cucumbers and like some kimchi and some fermented turnips, also had like a puree of fermented pumpkin, which was really a lovely complement to the other kinds of textures on the pickle plate. So I mean, definitely you can ferment the pumpkins, and I think that as long as you don't try to leave it for many weeks or months, you can use a pumpkin as a vessel. Absolutely, I've played around with it and had good results. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is like, he was recounting his story of like trying to start a kimchi club and how much people enjoyed it, but also how sort of hard it was to sustain. And I think that, well, I mean, this event is such a beautiful example of how fermentation can bring people together, and people can inspire each other, and educate one another. And yeah, I mean, I've been to, I once was in a little college town in North Carolina, and some students at the college there were having a kimchi party. And the way they had structured it is everybody brought a couple of jars, and everybody brought a few different vegetables. And so it ended up being pretty haphazard what the collection of vegetables that they had was, but it was sort of beautiful watching what kind, how by the end of the evening, how everybody's jars of vegetables looked different. Like they had the same palette to work with, but ended up walking out with such different kinds of things, just almost as if everyone walked in with a color of paint, and everybody like painted a picture, and everybody, ended up with, just a very different looking picture. And, to me, that's just like so exciting that, just how everybody interprets it a little bit differently and has different ideas about it. Now, I mean, how to sustain, well, I guess one thing I would say is like, things like that don't necessarily always have to be sustained for long periods of time. You can do something like that just as a one-off thing, and then each person learns from it whatever they learn. Each person goes home with some something to ferment that they can keep on eating. And not every kind of event has to be like a regular, every week or every month thing. But I've also met people who have organized, regular events, generally not weekly, but like a monthly meetup kind of event or something. Sometimes where each meeting will have a different like theme. and someone will maybe make a presentation on let's say secondary fermentations of kombucha, and different techniques that people use to carbonate their kombucha, different kinds of flavorings that people like to add to their kombucha, how people contend with the possibility of overcarbonation and exploding bottles and things like that. And so just for people to share their experiences with one another, maybe taste each other's ferments. I think that, one of the reasons why, we're seeing this fermentation explosion when we are, I think is due to the internet, and the internet as a way for, sort of people with specific interests to find one another. And I think that, the internet has given rise to a lot of, sort of people with similar interests, like different kinds of ferments, being able to, find each other and inspire each other. So I think that, fermentation is a great theme for, building community, bringing people together, sharing skills. I don't have a specific, sort of system or, method to tell you to use, but I think that, just like putting it out there and finding some like-minded people, and then, finding what kind of, rhythm works for people in terms of how frequently you get together. You just have to figure out with the specific group of people that you're able to find. But I mean, clearly there's a ton of interest, and there's lots of people wanting to learn more, and it's a great thing to learn together. I mean, let me say something about expertise, okay? I mean, I find myself in the strange position of sometimes hearing myself referred to as like the world's expert on fermentation. Like, I promise you, I'm not the world's expert on fermentation. I have no formal background. I started doing this when I was 31 or 32 years old. I'm totally self-taught. When I find myself, working with a commercial baker who bakes 150 loaves of bread every day, or someone who runs a kimchi business where, they're every week making, hundreds of pounds of kimchi, or someone who grew up in a family where, they were making idlis for breakfast every day for their entire lives. I'm a generalist. I'm sort of not an expert at any of this. If I have any expertise, it's just that I am, I know a little bit about making kimchi, and a little bit about making kombucha, and a little bit about making yogurt, and a little bit about making idli, and I've been able to connect a lot of dots. But it's also been very powerful to be able to share that with people. And, I think that, we all have to, sort of, recognize that the experiences that we have, the skills that we develop, are things that we can share with people, and we don't have to have all of the answers. We don't have to be, the ultimate experts in the world to be able to share this with people. So, you take whatever you've learned about, and then you show other people how you do it. And there's no one way to do any of this stuff. I mean, I once watched someone deliver a sourdough making workshop, and her message was, you have to do it exactly like this or it won't work. And I mean, from where I'm standing, that's absurd. I mean, just because I've seen so many different styles of how people approach their sourdough. I've seen people who maintain their sourdough as a liquid, and I've seen people who maintain their sourdough as a solid, and every texture in between. And, I've seen people who ferment bread in 4 or 5 hours, and I've seen people who do a process that's 4 or 5 days. And, clearly there's no single way to make bread from a sourdough. There's no, single way to make sauerkraut. There's no single way to make kimchi. I mean, these are, there's no single way to make kombucha. These are, these traditions that have been elaborated and varied, and there's, all kinds of regional variations. And ultimately it comes down to family secrets. What's like, what's, some grandma's like, sort of special ingredient or some special element of the process. And so, you share the expertise that you have, but, it's never the only way to do it. And then as you're sharing it with people, you'll have people say like, oh, well, I learned how to do it this way. And you learn a different way of doing it. And, there's just so many ways to do all these things. Yes. Okay, the question is about freezing sauerkraut or heating it. Okay, so the question is about freezing it or heating it and how that affects the nutritional value. Well, if you're interested in the probiotic benefit of the sauerkraut, the bacteria themselves, heating it above the gentlest warming, basically heating it above about 120 Fahrenheit, what is that, like 45, 47 degrees Celsius, will just kill all the bacteria. Freezing, basically, the way freezing degrades bacteria is by water expanding and bursting cell walls. So, the studies that I've seen of that with sauerkraut suggest that every freeze and thaw cycle will kill off some cells, but not all of them. In general, with fermented foods, the waterier they are, the more freezing will kill the bacteria. The drier they are, the less they'll be impacted by freezing.